Hi everyone! Today I'm going to be demonstrating this colored pencil drawing of an anemone. The reference for this drawing came from Ilona E. Stefan over on a Facebook group called Free Reference Photos for Artists. I am working with Prismacolor and Polychromos pencils on Arches hot press watercolor paper for this drawing, and you can see me getting started on just the center area. I used an embossing tool to indent some of the paper so that when I came over with my darker colors, some of the little white highlights showed up underneath. And there are sort of two different little sections to this center. There's the very center where it's really light and almost pollen-y, and then there are these little dark seeds that are around the edges. I do not know all of the scientific names for all of the parts of this flower, so I thought of it as the pollen-y area and the seeds. So however it works for you. I was just using my reference image and copying what I could see. Now I'm using the electric eraser to brighten up some little details in here. Used a lot of different strategies to create the texture here. Working back and forth between the white pencil, the eraser, and the different colors. And finally adding a little bit of this Posca paint pen to really brighten things up, and then working in and around that because I didn't want it to be too bright. And back and forth with that Posca paint pen. I don't always use that in my drawings, but anytime I want to add some really bright details, I will go to that Posca paint pen. It's really helpful to get those bright details on top of your colored pencil drawings. So now I'm starting to work on the petals, and for all of these petals I followed the same process. I used a really dark pencil to outline the main veins in the petal to start to create some shape, and I was using either the Delft blue from Polychromos or the dioxazine purple hue from Prismacolor, and in most cases I was using both of those pencils to get those really dark veins. And then I would come over with the white Prismacolor pencil and block in any place that I wanted highlights in the drawing. Then I would come over with my mid-tone colors. I was using a few different colors, and I can actually just list them out for you here. I was using from Prismacolor powder blue, violet, imperial violet, parma violet, lilac, and from the Polychromos I was using light ultramarine, Delft blue, mauve, blue violet, and a little bit of the purple violet. So after I came through with the mid-tone colors, then I blended everything with Gamsol odorless mineral spirits, and then the real work began, which is what you can see me doing here right now. Just layer after layer after layer, going back and forth with those white pencils and the darker pencils to create those really nice detailed fine lines. So moving on here quickly to draw this shadow petal that's underneath those two, and then on to a few more petals. I drew the rest of those petals that you saw pop up there really quickly. I drew those in real time over on my Patreon page, and so I skipped over them a little bit on the overview video here. But if you do want to learn to draw this, I do have a 5-part tutorial series over on Patreon that's available now, and one of the modules, or actually 2 of the modules, include drawing those petals in real time. I also talk a lot about color selection, and I do the real-time drawing of the center of the flower, and also real-time drawing of the leaves that are coming up here in a little bit. So lots of modules over there on Patreon if you're interested in learning how to draw this yourself. I think the biggest takeaway for this one, or the thing that stands out as being the most important part of the process here, is just the layering. It was multiple layers. You can see how this starts out. It's really ugly, crayony, does not look realistic whatsoever, and it's just layer after layer after layer that gets it to the point that it starts to look more like a painting, more like a realistic painting. Really have to establish that base with the veins and the white pencil for the highlights, and getting the shadows in. The shadows and the highlights and the direction and curve of those veins, that's what creates the shape of these petals. That's what makes it look like they are coming away from the center and curving the way they are. Creating a lot of depth down here in this, where these 3 petals come together. Using the black Prismacolor pencil even underneath the dioxazine purple hue. And now just working back over the same petal, I just shifted the paper to make it a little bit easier for my hand, and just back and forth between the bright white pencil and the darker blues and purples, and layering it up until I'm happy with it. And moving on to the last petal on this flower, it was probably the easiest petal to draw. Not quite as much detail, and the main focus was to really get that nice dark shadow and then the nice highlight around the edges so that it looks like it's bending out. Blending it with Gamsol, and now coming back through. I always let the Gamsol dry for at least maybe 15 minutes to a half an hour, especially on this paper. Some papers you don't need to let it dry quite so long. And then coming back over, again, just back and forth with all of these different colors. And now moving on to the leaves. Now the leaves were, it's almost like a completely different drawing. The way I approached these was very different, but I used 3 pencils here, no 4. I used the 2 blacks, the Polychromos and the Prismacolor, and so I guess 5. Then I used 2 white pencils, the Prismacolor and the Polychromos whites, and then the main green. Pretty much the only green that I used in here was the Polychromos Chrome Oxide Green. And the reason for that is I just decided to keep these leaves really just with one color because I wanted the flower to really stand out, and there is already a lot of detail going on in these leaves. I just thought to introduce a bunch of different colors here would almost distract from everything else that I have going on. I had drawn a drawing of some tulips a few years ago where I used some really light, more monotone colors in the stem, and I really liked that. So that's kind of what I was thinking about here as I just made that decision to just use one color. I did get several different values of that green because I was layering the green on top of the white pencil, on top of the black pencil, and then on top of the paper by itself. So I was getting 3 to 4 different values of that chrome oxide green. So it does look like there's some variation in these leaves. But you could choose any of the greens that you think complement the flower to use for this process. I think a Prismacolor pencil might have even worked better. There were times that I struggled to get quite as good a coverage as I wanted to with that Polychromos, but in the end I was able to work that out. So here I'm coming through and basically just going over everything with that single color. And so the variation that you're seeing here is just from where the white pencil and the black pencil were. And this looks kind of messy here. You're going to see me come over and blend this out with Gamsol. I spent a lot of time on these leaves, continuously sharpening that pencil and going around those edges. I really wanted some really nice sharp detail there. And now blending everything out with the Gamsol, giving a nice smooth look. And after I let it dry, then I can come back through with my next layers. And here you can see me using more of the black Prismacolor. And this section was a lot easier because I already had everything all mapped out. So could just come back through and darken the shadows and brighten the highlights. And I went over this, I think, 2 times completely after I blended with Gamsol. So just back and forth to just keep working on it until you're happy with it at this point. So it's coming back and forth between that white Prismacolor pencil and that chrome oxide green, and layering those 2 pencils back and forth. The white pencil really does a good job of bringing out some highlights, similarly to the way it did on the leaves of the flower. And now moving on to the other side. That Polychromos Chrome Oxide Green is one of my very favorite greens. I keep saying I want to do a tutorial on just my favorite colors from the different brands, so hopefully I'm going to pull something together soon for that, but that Chrome Oxide Green is definitely a must-have. And I decided to do the stem just in a solid gray and lighten it up a little bit because I am going to come back through and add a black background for this drawing. And if I had kept the stem black, then that would have just disappeared into the background, but that would have been a good choice if you were going to keep the background white, just to make the stem black or really dark gray or really dark green, and then keep the leaves on top of it a little bit lighter. But I went a little darker with the leaves and a little lighter with the stem for that reason, because I'm going to add the background. Now you can start to see the entire drawing come together. And here is the completed drawing. So thanks so much for watching this one. Again, if you would like to learn how to do this yourself, you can head over to my Patreon page. You can also visit my website at www.jennifermorrisonart.com and see a list of all of the tutorials I have available. There are over 200 at this point, all botanical drawings with colored pencil. And so you can check that out if you're interested. And otherwise, I will be back with another drawing video next week. Bye.